recording and live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order in just a few minutes. We're just waiting for a couple more commissioners to join the call. So my apologies to those who may be in attendance. We have 2 of the 4 currently required. So it's my hope and expectation that the others will show up in the immediate future. This also gives a little time for any more other attendees to join. I do see Mr. Monaco, who's on the agenda for 7 Norman Avenue here. So we'll be discussing that when we kick off the official meeting. Oh, okay, there's a third. Just need one more. So.
Well, and this is Chris. Can you hear me?
Yep, heard you loud and clear, Chris.
Okay, I'm on my phone, so I'm having trouble connecting.
Oh,
can you see me?
Yeah, your video
Okay.
just popped up as well. Yep,
all right,
that's fine.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
How about Biff? Do you want to check your audio, Biff?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you loud and clear now. Thanks.
Great.
Okay, so we're just waiting for, it's unusual for Mr. Morgan to be late, but so we'll give him another minute or so. I've got 7:02. We have to have 4 commissioners to have a legally acceptable, for lack of a better term, meeting. That is the minimum quorum, and it's also the minimum required to pass any motions. So I don't want to say anything more until we officially start the meeting, but I'll address that in just a moment. I'm going to see if I can. I just sent a quick text message to the remaining commissioner. If the 4th member is not here by 7:05, we may have to call it an early evening. So let's just see what happens. If you can hear, can the attendees hear me now, Caitlin, as far as you know?
They can, but let me unmute them.
Okay, well, I just was going to say for those in the attendees list, I do see 2 people there. So I just want to express my apologies on behalf of the commission here that we're held up slightly. Hopefully it won't be long.
No problem this is Braden Monaco. No problem on my end if you guys want to take a few minutes. I'm glad to wait.
Yeah. Well, we kind of have no choice, Mr. Monaco, because of the
yeah, of course.
Situation. It's funny, since we haven't officially begun, I feel I can get away with telling this little story. Every time I see or hear or say your name, I think of my junior high school principal, who is Mr. Monaco. Sorry about that.
Hopefully he was a nice guy.
He was okay. Yeah, I don't know. No strong feelings either way. No bias there. Well, something may have happened. I hope nothing serious to Commissioner Morgan. He's usually here. So here's the situation. It's 7:05. We only have 3 members. We're required to have at least 4. On the good news side, I will say that earlier this evening, 7th commissioner was discussed. His name is Chris Sautel. He's discussed with the Planning Development Committee, and his name will be passed on to the City Council. So we should be up to the full staffing of 7 members shortly. But we can't legally vote on anything. We can't really have a legal meeting with only 3 commissioners, even including myself. So there's not much we can do. Now, since Mr. Monaco, do you want to try to hold on? Because what I was going to say is that given only 4 members present, you would have to any motion, let's say well, any motion would need a unanimous yes vote to pass, because a quorum of 4 affirmative votes is required to pass any motion. So what applicants sometimes do, not infrequently, is if they can afford to wait and they would feel that they don't want to, risk some lone dissenting member, killing their project, so to speak, we can continue to a future meeting when hopefully we'll have, more members. Although I think, Caitlin, what do you remember what Andrew said in his email? Is he going to be back in March? Is it?
In March, yep. But
Hmm.
hopefully we'll have Mark Sandrone available.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark and Joe, and even soon, Chris Sautel. Anyway, so we can, well, if we don't have a meeting, I guess that'll automatically be continued. So
I mean, I would say, look, I'm willing to hold on and see if the fourth person does show up. I'm hopefully confident that based on the information on this property and the area and the neighborhood and
mhm.
the condition the home is in and the lack of historical significance, that this should be a pretty easy vote, I would hope. So I'd be willing to wait if you guys have some other business to take care of it. If not,
Well, but even if, well, we do have other business, but we can't do any of it without a quorum. So, and we're kind of dead in the water, as they say. But all right, so since you're willing to wait a little bit, I've got 7:08 now. We'll give it 7:10. I did. Oh, okay. He did respond to my text, so that's a good sign. That means he should be joining shortly. So that's good. Okay, so he should be here shortly. I'm also relieved that, nothing, that means, I assume that means nothing bad happened to Mr. Morgan. So I don't have any amusing music to play while we're waiting. All right, entertaining.
I'll take requests.
Earlier this evening, my wife and I she was fascinated with the notion of, quote, novelty songs. So we were entertaining ourselves with some of the wacky novelty songs that are readily available on YouTube. Ah, good. I see Mr. Morgan's name has popped up. When you get a chance, Joe, can you check your audio?
Thanks so much. Sorry, everyone.
Okay, you're here. Okay, well, we have a quorum. So therefore, I will officially call to order the meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission for the 9th day of February 2023. Please note that, like all these city virtual meetings, this meeting is being recorded. So do a quick roll call. Mr. Biff Bouse, right?
Yes.
You're here. Okay. Christopher Fay.
I'm here.
Okay. And Mr. Morgan.
Yes, here.
Just heard from you. And the chair is Glenn Richards. And obviously I'm here, and as you can hear from the sound of my voice. Also present, Caitlin Sullivan at the planning office, and Gretchen Joy is taking notes. Caitlin, Andy is not joining us tonight, correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. I'll make a note here. All right. So we have one demolition delay application tonight, and the way this is teed up at the moment, it has not public hearing has not been scheduled for the what's it called, the demolition plan review and all that. We're here strictly for a determination on historical significance. So before we have a motion or anything on that, Mr. Monaco, would you like to briefly describe the project here, and why you feel it's not historically significant and ripe for demolition? I saw, and also clarify, I believe it's your intention to do a complete demo.
Correct. So, yes, my partner and I purchased this property a few months back here at 7 Norman Ave. The home was built in 1947, which falls within that time restriction, and why I believe we're here today. Other than that, the property itself, if you look at it from, kind of the outside in, is a single story ranch or cape. It was again built in 1947, all vinyl windows, vinyl doors. There is no foundation in this property. It is built on steel beams with concrete footings. So really not a whole lot we can do with the property as it sits today. We did purchase it as is. It is in rough shape inside and out. And we obviously had some great feedback from the neighborhood, as there were some people squatting in the home and things of that nature over the last year or so. So, from the pictures you can see here, there's, not from my perspective, I can't speak for you all, but from a historical significance perspective, there's really no materials built into the home that we could see that would be salvageable. There's nothing, we like to keep the detail if we can, but there's really nothing here that we could see salvaging, between the windows, the vinyl siding. If you look around the neighborhood, there's other houses that you can see right next door in that picture there. There's some houses that have been modified or adjusted to fit the modern living needs of a modern family. So the goal would be to remove the house fully from the property, clear the lot, and build a new construction home there that again would meet the needs of a modern family moving into the city.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Monaco. I do now, before we go into our deliberations here, I do see one other person in the attendee list. So in case that it's quite common to allow a quick, brief public comment on these. I know in the past, people have wanted to make public comment on these, even when it's just a determination of historical significance. So I'll formally open a public comment period just in case I see that other person. The deal is, if you want to make a public comment, use the Zoom control to, quote, raise your hand somewhere on the Zoom application, whether you're on a laptop or tablet or phone or whatever. And if we see a hand go up, we'll recognize you to speak and unmute you and so on, and you can make your comment. As with any public meeting, you identify yourself, your name and address, and make your comment. And then don't forget to lower your hand after you speak. So we'll open that, and I'll allow a few seconds to see if that other person who is in attendance wishes to make a comment. I need that little syncopated clock theme for right now, but I don't have it. And I'm not seeing any hand go up. All right, so I'll assume that that person does not wish to make a comment. So we'll formally close public comment period. And I'll invite my fellow commissioners to ask first, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Braden Monaco here? Or have a quick comment or on the situation? Yeah, Biff, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a little quick comment. I was just kind of curious about the history of the home before the meeting. I live fairly close by, just on the other side of the elementary school. So our neighborhood's basically identical. It's all, the mid-century capes built mostly for folks, returning home from World War II, and a lot of these streets were built just for that. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of the information, just because I thought it was kind of interesting what I dug up. The house looks like it was. Let's see if I find the. Sorry, the house first was purchased by Albert Avery in 1948, I believe, and the city, the street that it's Norman Avenue is actually named after a Norman Checkaway, who was a World War II soldier who died in overseas in action. And the street, Murphy Street, at the end of it, it was also named after Charles P. Murphy, who passed away in World War II. The Checkaway family, his Norman Checkaway's brother and father, were actually instrumental in purchasing all the land on that lot in that area, and so that's why they named the street after him. So the Checkaway family owned all the property on Norman Avenue and sold it to another company. I forgot the name of it, and immediately sold those units off individually. And they had some kind of interesting arrangement where I believe the investment company owned the majority of the house, and then they had kind of a partial ownership. I guess it's probably an easier way for them to get into the ownership game. And Albert Avery was prominent in, let's see, what was his, he worked for what ended up becoming the vacuum tube company. Ended up merging, was it Sony who merged with the vacuum tube company? I'm forgetting the name of it. But he was a foreman there for a long time and ran for city council a number of times. But I just thought it was a fun little journey down just kind of the history of the area and how this was developed out, and sort of gave me some insight into the people who first lived in some of these homes. So with that said, looking at the house, is there much there to be considered salvageably historic importance? I'm not seeing a lot of it, and not knowing the inside of it or how it's built underneath, other than your description. I don't see anything terribly wrong with it. And overall, I would be against completely, getting rid of a building when you could somehow, make it better and add to it. But if it sounds like this is not that case, and if it's mostly just vinyl and plastic we're removing, I'm all for that. So, but anyways, I thought just the history behind the street name and the tie to this property was fairly interesting, and thought I could share it with y'all.
I appreciate. I know I do. So one of the things I touch on with you on there, Biff, is we traditionally try to keep as much of the homes as we can. We've done a couple of other ones in town and kept foundations, first floor walls, whatever we can. Truthfully, our hope for this one was that they weren't telling us the truth and it actually had a foundation, but we could cut the floor open, and it's just 3.5 feet off the ground with steel beams, and There's not a whole lot in the house that we could even, salvage to try to build on. So to your point of, obviously trying to do what we, from financially, it makes sense for us to try to keep as much as we can as well, but
Sure.
we wouldn't be able to go up on it, and there really isn't much in the construction of the home that we could use to move forward.
So was the outside, the vinyl, was that cover any kind of wood at one point, or does it look like it's always been some sort of prefab material on the house?
It does look like it's been prefabbed. I mean, we pulled away a little bit. We couldn't find much under it. So I don't know if it was cleared off and redone, but it definitely looks as though there wasn't much in the home that was existing.
Because one of the things I had found doing the research was that several of the homes that first appeared there were prefab homes built off-site and taken there. So I'm wondering
this is I was talking to a couple of the neighbors, and I this was one of those homes that got brought in and just dropped on the steel beams.
Yeah, that makes sense then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to share the history of that. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Biff. And thanks also for confirming my suspicions between the date. And I did go out there to take a quick look, and Mr. Manico's description, I can't disagree with any of it from what I could see. He pretty much told it like it is there. And I suspect that it was part of the post-World War II building boom for returning GIs and so on. So thanks for that little confirming that suspicion, Biff. Anyone else have a comment to make on this?
Yeah, Glenn, it's Chris. You can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate what Biff just talked about, and I'm just looking at it in the context of neighborhood on my computer. And I guess I would have a concern, and I haven't looked at the house, so I'll trust the condition of the house. The vinyl siding to me isn't a big issue personally, but it's not consistent with what the house would have had, but it's certainly consistent with what may have transpired, since the house was built at some point. And I'm also kind of looking at I'm looking at the house, on my computer screen, just to the left. It looks like a brown or maroonish house, just a simple cape. And I guess what I would be fearful of is that's the next house to go. And then if we go across the street, like, there is a historical value. I know some of you have heard me say this before, but we're reaching that point where a house of this era into the 1950s does come on our purview because of the age of the house. But again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but not all the houses in Newburyport have to be sea captains' houses or old colonial houses or old federal houses, because it is a living city. And I don't need to repeat what Biff or you just mentioned about returning GIs, and so I think Biff made the case for that. I would hate to see those houses just be seen as sort of throwaway houses. And I can appreciate that, as we've talked about for many years, in some cases for some of us, the need of the modern family to have certain things.
Yep.
And my good friend Malcolm isn't here, but I've heard him say that, a neighborhood like this may be seen as something that's not historically significant. And I'm not going to say what Malcolm would say, I think, or what I've heard him say in this case, but the needs of the modern family sometimes don't jive with the needs of the historic commission's need to preserve the homes, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And not just those homes in the neighborhoods that I live in and you live in and some other people live in, near the waterfront or near downtown. It sounds like Biff lives, I think I heard him say, lives near this is near the hospital. So
Yep.
I think that's a neighborhood that to me is an interesting neighborhood historically.
Yeah.
It also kind of jives with what, kind of what I teach about. So maybe I have a little bit of a bias there as well.
Yeah.
I don't know on this one. I just don't know on this one because my fear would be that these just there's a precedent here, and
Yep. I do, believe me, I do know exactly what you're talking about. This photo we're looking at, if you look down at the corner, what looks like there's a garbage truck down there, that's North Atkinson Street, just so you kind of see where this is. So if you went down to the end and look to your right, down on the left corner would be that home, was that like a assisted, I think it's more like a
Correct.
nursing home actually. And
Yep.
then up to the left, you get to the new school and senior center and
Right.
all that on
Right.
the left up there. So that's where this is. You
Right.
know, all right, here's the deal on this. If the first thing I want to just remind everyone, and some of you already know this, that if we determine that the house is not historically significant, then that's the end of our involvement in this particular case. What the house will be okay to be demolished, and what gets built will be whatever is consistent with the city ordinances and zoning rules and regulations, and whatever variances the zoning board grants as as might be required, depending on what Mr. Monaco wants to put there. The if it is historically significant, it doesn't necessarily mean it can't be demolished. But what it does mean is that we would have a demo plan review where the historical commission would take a look at well, the demolition plan. The demolition plan specifically would be okay, complete demo. That's pretty obvious. But then but it also includes what is to go in its place. So we could have some influence, shall we say, over what gets put in its place, so that if there was concern on the commission that there is a streetscape, there's a neighborhood context and all of that, I think in my own personal opinion that's the only real that's kind of the only kind of meaningful objection or reason we might have for imposing it, wanting to have a demo delay hearing. But I'd like to hear, from you other three, if you think that's, even it's I don't think it's, we talked a lot about streetscape and neighborhood context, as I'm sure you guys remember. Well, Biff wasn't on the board, but I'm sure Joe and Chris remember the extensive discussions about that in the case of 93 State Street. That's the Institution for Savings. So it's not, it's not beyond our remit, so to speak, to consider that. But as you can see, thank you, Caitlin, actually, for changing this, because you do notice that some houses are pretty much as built or nearly, and others have already been expanded, grown, added on to, modified, etc., as Mr. Monaco, correctly pointed out. So, I really kind of wrestle with this, but I'd love to hear your guys' opinions on if you think, there's a real justifiable case to be made here that, we wouldn't be considered, the hysterical commission for wanting to have exercise some control over maintaining some sense of that period in Newburyport's history where these small, inexpensive, not to say cheap, houses were put up and put up quickly, probably because of the need for housing in those days. But we have a need for housing today too. So if it's not an easy decision. So let me shut up and see if any of you guys has any sage words of wisdom to enlighten us on that. Anyone at all want to comment? I know.
Glenn, this is Braden
yeah,
quickly.
yeah.
Caitlin, do you mind going through? So I do have a couple of other pictures in there. Obviously, you guys have driven the street and understand it, but there's a couple of others that she can touch on that have been completely updated and removed in the neighborhood. Obviously, this one here hasn't been removed, but you can see there's a foundation. So it was either not built exactly in the time frame or not. But there's a couple of others. One on Murphy. And then one right behind us on Low Street. So I understand it's not on Norman, but it's directly abutting the backyard. If you go to picture 10 is Low Street, and then picture 11 is right on Murphy Ave, right at the end of Norman Ave. So, there's obviously, to your point, there's been a lot of adjustments. This is the house directly next door to us.
Right.
So I certainly appreciate the idea of trying to keep these properties alive, intact, based on the history of them, and talking about the house that was to the left of us, to the other gentleman's point was, that one's not far behind. And unfortunately, it's not far behind because the homeowners just don't keep up with it either. It's a rented property. The homeowners, I believe, live in Florida or Arizona, and they rent it to a woman that's just responsible to take care of it on her own. So these properties, for whatever reason, just have not been taken care of. And it's not the likelihood of all the properties on the street, but a few of them certainly haven't been kept up like others.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Monaco. And what was I going to say? I had a thought. Oh, do you happen to know if the I'm imagine you've already looked into what restrictions you might have as to how large you can build on that lot and so on, because I think a lot of it, my problem, again, speaking strictly for myself, a lot of that type of houses, I think one of my colleagues said, throwaway type of construction, and it kind of is. It was just put up very quickly and inexpensively. So it's not so much that building fabric that concerns me, because it's pretty not very attractive or whatever, and it's not even indicative of its time so much as its form and size and that sort of thing. So I'm more concerned with trying to keep that sense of scale, that sense of neighborhood context, so it's not like some McMansion type of thing that looks totally out of place, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's going to be obviously bigger because of the cost
Right.
of purchasing and the cost of construction. It has to be something that's viable from a resale perspective, as well as something that
Sure.
people can raise a family in. The way it stands right now, I mean, it's really small. So
Yeah.
we're clearly going to be, an upward extension of over 500 square feet, but it's, from a square footage perspective, not much bigger than that house you just saw next door. And the footprint itself on the property is larger, but we've actually pulled, in the design, which you're not going to see here, we pulled it off the street a little bit more, so it's not right on the street. It's actually going to sit back about, the garage will be right at the same spot, but the main house will sit back about 15 feet from where it is now. So the scale of the house won't be so big on the street. I'm trying to keep in, consideration of the neighbors and such. I don't know if it matters in this context at all, but we've already had 3 or 4 neighbors come up to us thanking us for buying the house and taking it off the property because of what it's, the detriment to the neighborhood it's becoming. It's been like this for quite a while now. So, obviously it'll be a 2-story home, just under 3,000 square feet. But it's obviously classically done, and I wouldn't say similar to the one on Murphy because it's not as big as that home, but there'll be some nice roof lines and very clean angles, and nothing crazy for sure. But obviously bigger than what's there today.
Yeah.
But it will meet, just not that I don't know if it matters for you all, but we are going to actually clean up. There's quite a few non-conformities in the property right now from setbacks and such. And the proposed house will end up meeting all zoning and planning requirements for setbacks. So we're going to actually shrink the footprint in a little bit so it meets all those side setbacks and all that where it doesn't today.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Joe, any comment? You're the only one that hasn't really opined on this particular one.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I don't really have much to say. I don't see much interest in the property from a historical perspective. It doesn't seem like it has any, neither the building itself, nor, as far as I can tell, the streetscape has any thing that recommends itself for historical preservation. I would move that it's a historical structure and hope everyone that votes no. But I think it's a funny structure. I think it's funny if you just look at it. And the previous owners, presumably there have been some previous owners here in the recent past. I don't know if the structure was abandoned or what, but these arborvitae have grown up in front. It's as if they wanted to hide the building. They were so ashamed of it. And also, I mean, I think it was just like 1,000 square foot plus. I mean, it was really a very small house built on grade, or almost. It's got a crawl space, I guess. But the only prominent part of it, which I guess might be fitting for a 1947 building, is the 2-car garage. That's the only part that seems fitting to actually display to their neighbors.
Yeah.
It's almost a caricature of a house from that era. You know, I don't know if that lends itself to preservation or not. I don't think so. I don't think it's actually in any kind of physical state to actually be preserved. But I mean, I don't see any reasoning that we'd want to keep. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for your comments, Joe. So just so you guys are all clear, if we have a motion to that, it's just we'll phrase the motion in the affirmative that someone can move that the house is historically significant, and it would have to be 4 yeses for that to pass. If that fails with any nay votes, then the structure will be considered not historically significant. So I just want to make sure we're all clear on that. Unless there's another comment, if someone would like to make a motion, we can give it a shot.
Glenn, can I just throw one more thing in? 'Cause
Sure,
I think
Chris.
when we talk again, I don't want to maybe repeat stuff, but Biff brought up historical significance, I think. I don't know if that was his intent or not, but what was I going to say? Houses built for returning veterans I don't think that sort of tells the whole story, right? And it was that it was cheap, mass-produced housing. It might have been, dropped in, might be prefab. We don't know, right? We don't know. But we know that these types of houses were mass-produced all over the country, but they were mass-produced because there was a housing need. But there was a housing need for World War II GIs. And I don't know who said, like, there's a housing need today. That's understandable, but we don't have millions of guys returning from a war that are looking to kind of take a leap or two up the socioeconomic ladder like these guys, many of these guys were. I don't know what the condition of the house. I'm looking at a nice house, I guess. I don't know what the condition is. I'm just looking at the picture. I'm looking at this being a house that exists, that the people like me at least grew up in all across the country. So I think there is a historical significance in what the housing was intended for. And the other thing I wanted to say, now I remember what it was. The other houses that may have at some point been leveled or added on to, like maybe the house with the pickup truck that I'm looking at on Google Maps, may very well have been taking place looking at the style 40 years ago, well before these types of houses would have been considered by a committee like ours historically significant based upon their age. So we had let's say hypothetically, we had no purview over that. We do have a purview over this now. And again, I would hate to just have these sort of houses tossed aside because they don't have, like, I don't know, all the other features or whatever else it is, right?
Yeah. Okay. And that was me that said about the need for housing today. I think Mr. Bells has a hand up, or did you?
Yeah, I did. I did want to just kind of echo on that. I did bring up the history of it because I feel the same way. I guess I'm kind of torn because it's in its structure. It's not an appealing structure. It's not, it's not a federal street or it's not a federal on High Street. It's very simple, but it does have an important role in American architecture, and the streetscape, like I said, it reminds me of just a few blocks away on Iona, and it's all the houses around us are all very similar, and there's been a couple there was actually one that was very similar to this house, and they took the Cape Cod part of it and turned it into a 3-car garage, and then built like a modern house kind of behind it on the lot. And every time I look at it, I'm just like, I get it, but I also, it just, somebody lived there, and now that where they had their, Thanksgiving meals or whatever, somebody's parking their car there, and that part, I think, and that's why I did want to bring up some of the history, because I think just that even though these people aren't important people necessarily, they were, they're big enough to get in the paper. They were relevant. They were of their community. So I think that's what that's what's pulling me right now, is that if it didn't have that and it was, 30, 40 years younger, I think that we wouldn't be talking about it, but it's, it is to that point where it's like, okay, it's an historic period of architecture. Is it important? A lot of the stuff, it's like, maybe in 40 years we'll be like kicking ourselves because we got rid of these. It's, I don't know. I probably not, but it's, I guess I'm just kind of a little torn on it.
Yeah. I mean, this is a question mostly for you, Biff, and Chris, that based from what I could see from taking a look at it and walking around and a little peeking one of the windows, it's obviously been vacant a while. Anyway, it's not particularly I guess what a realtor would say, it's not particularly marketable at the moment. In fact, it's like when my in-laws' old place, the realtor came in, looked at, and said, I think we're looking at a tear down. So, or a complete gut. In this case, not even a gut job, because the quality of construction doesn't make it a viable option, and the size, for what even a small family is looking for these days, just I'm familiar with houses of that size because my in-laws had one, and it's like they're not, well, it's not good, put it that way. At any rate, so here's my question for you guys: is I think that well, how do you think it would serve the needs of preservation of the community context, the neighborhood context, to replace this, but replace it with something that kind of retains some of that contextual I don't know what to call it, feel. I think you know what I'm getting at.
Reference.
That basically cannot do too much damage to that streetscape in that neighborhood, put it that way. Because like I said, I don't think anyone's going to want to buy it to just move in and live there. It's pretty tough.
Right. I think that's where, like I said, I was torn, because it's obviously not something that you're going to want to do something with or to necessarily save, but I guess it's more of, I think to your point, I think it's more about the streetscape and having some sort of influence in keeping that streetscape somewhat in check, so that it's not just becoming this monopoly board of increasing the size of these homes to but that, I mean, is that our place? That's
right,
the other problem.
Yeah, right? And that's another consideration. I think it pushes the envelope slightly in terms of what the historical commission's purview really would be. At any rate, so I don't want to drag this out all night. So what do you think? Is someone ready to make a motion? We can take a vote and see how it comes out.
Yes, this is Joe. I'll move that 7 Norman is an historical structure.
Okay, so in other words, it's historically significant, to use the language of the
significant. That's correct.
Yeah. Is there a second for that?
I can second that.
All right, I heard Biff first, so we'll put him in there. Okay, in alphabetical order, Mr. Baus, your vote on that.
Yes.
Okay. Chris Fay?
Yeah, I'm a yes.
Okay. Joe Morgan?
No.
Okay. And the chair, oh geez, I have to make up my mind, huh? I think I'm gonna side with Mr. Morgan on this, but anyway, it wouldn't matter because we would need all 4 affirmative votes to pass. A little bit regrettable, because I do totally understand, Biff, your comments, and Chris, your comments. It was the fact that we even talked about this for so long. I'm sure Mr. Monaco came in here thinking this was a kind of a slam dunk, but clearly it's not. But I just couldn't see, I just the practical side of me just doesn't see a future for this particular structure as it is. So Mr. Monaco, I hope you will, I have no control over what you eventually do, but I do hope you're sincere in the comments you made about what you intend to do and plan to do, and do something that will, that the neighborhood will basically thank you for, as you've suggested.
Yeah, I think our intention, and I appreciate your time, all of you. The comments you make are, we understand it, and I think that the goal is to build something that obviously increases the values of the homes around them, and people around us are appreciative of what we're trying to do. And obviously they'll have an opportunity to vocalize their opinion as well during the process with planning board. So
right.
We've showed the plans to a few of the neighbors to get their feedback, and I think they understand that it's part of the growth of the community and what the community is looking for.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Monaco. In case you didn't quite catch that, so being that it's just it's not considered historically significant, you don't have to deal with any demo delay or anything from us. You'll just have whatever permits and so forth are going to be required from the other departments throughout the city.
I appreciate all of your time this evening. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hey, Glenn?
Yes,
Glenn?
sir.
I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Wasn't the motion that it was historically significant?
Yes.
And I voted yes, and Biff voted yes.
Yes. But
So it didn't pass for that reason.
It didn't pass because it would need 4 affirmative votes to pass.
Okay.
And it only got 2.
Yeah. Okay.
Chair Richards, could I make a comment, sort of a follow on here?
Sure.
I just wanted to note that, 1947 puts us right at the 75-year-old threshold, which even brings it before us, right? We just barely get the structure before us from an age standpoint. Last year, it wouldn't have come before us, right? Probably. It would have just wouldn't have quite made that threshold. Yeah. But the point I'd like to make is that if we feel that now that more of these structures are going to be coming into our range, into our purview, and are going to become more visible to us as the Historical Commission, I would think that we might want to get a jump on it, and we might want to nominate some of these structures, a few of them that we think that might be deserving for Form B, for Form B documentation. That way we don't have to actually, the Form Bs are there as a resource to give some of the pedigrees for structures that are contributing historical structures within Newburyport, and maybe some of these post-war sort of suburb kind of housing, divisions as they move into this historical status, at least from an age standpoint, might merit to be documented on some of the Form B, so that we can understand a little bit better why we would want to preserve them, ourselves and future members of the board of the commission.
I am furiously typing, Joe, because I think that is an excellent idea.
I'd like to second that idea.
Yeah. In fact, I'll talk to Andy Port about this. I'll have to bug him again. We do actually have grant money that's been awarded to us to hire consultants who know how to put those Form Bs together and so on, to document some of these newer houses that got missed. Like it was only in the early 80s, around 1980, 81, that those the Mass Historical Commission and so forth were going around documenting and listing all the properties that were contributing, etc. So there's a lot of newer structures that could fall into this, either earlier, 20s, 30s, 40s, housing. And Joe, I couldn't have said it better. So I've made a note of that, and I will definitely follow up with Andy on that. And we should, make up a list of some candidates, and we can and we should do that. So yeah, we'll definitely follow up on that. Great idea. Why didn't I think of that? All right. Couple things. I feel that we have a statutory requirement beginning of each year to vote a chair and technically a vice chair too. So, and there's no sense keep putting it off and putting it off because it's supposed to be, the beginning of the year. We're already into February. Andrew's going to be gone at least for another meeting and so on. So rather than wait, I'm not going to stand on ceremony. I'll just suggest that if someone would like to make a motion to nominate myself to be chair for another year, that would be okay with me. If someone would like to do that, we can take a vote. So at least we've satisfied our statutory requirement to vote a chair. Since you're all springing forth, I guess you don't want me to be chair for another year.
I'll make a motion that Glenn be nominated for another year as chair.
Seconded. This is Joe. Second that.
Yeah, that last comment put the fear into it, didn't it? Okay. Okay, so why don't I slightly amend the motion to it? So I'll restate the motion as an affirmative vote. Okay, the motion is to appoint myself, Chairman Richards, for another year. So affirmative vote would basically approve that. A nay would be the obvious. All right. So let me make a quick note here. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. Okay. So Biff, your vote on that?
Aye.
Okay. Christopher Fay.
Aye.
Okay. Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair, oh, the chair dissents. No, the chair doesn't dissent. I'll go along with it because we got to get this thing over with. So we'll carry that motion, so we can move on. There's another update from the chair here regarding 98 High Street. Now, some of you probably recall that Bethany Duro was in here talking about their application to the CPC. I know Joe must be familiar with this. They're applying for some funds to do some work in the so-called Perkins Mint. And anyway, this doesn't relate to that per se, but part of the deal is that they have to have a preservation restriction. They do actually have one that's held by Mass Historical Commission, but it's not permanent. What's the word I'm looking for? Not permanent. What's that word? When perpetual.
Perfect.
Oh, well, is that did I get it right, Caitlin?
You did, yes.
Yeah. All right. So so we're redoing that, and we ran into a slight snag in that the draft we had, we thought we were nearly done on the home stretch, and Mass Historical pointed out that you mentioned in the that appendix, there were Exhibit E at the end that has the examples of what's major and minor changes, and it's mentioned about changes to the interior, and it was always, and their existing PR does protect the interior, which has got a lot of wonderful historical features, but the body of the new draft, we must have used as a model, we kind of copy these from an existing one. We must have used one that was only an exterior one, so it makes no mention of anything in the interior. So we've got to go back and redo that. So there's nothing that you guys need to do at this point, but this is an FYI. I just wanted you to be aware that we'll be working to I'm in contact with both Mass Historic on that and Bethany of the museum, so we can get that done as expeditiously as we can. Let's see. By the way, Caitlin, when you and I spoke earlier about can we base it on that Mass Historical PR, and can we use that as a model? The answer to that was actually no, for several reasons. So I did follow up on that and got the negative answer there. Did I have the only other thing I had? I already mentioned very briefly that Chris Sautel is going to be, his nomination for this board will be before the city council shortly. So hopefully that is moving along. In correspondence, again, no action required on this, but it's an FYI. 344 Merrimack Street. I believe that was the one we had a site visit down there. I know some of you recall it's a big lot. They're going to change from 2-family to 1-family, build a second house, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they're moving along, but they did have some corrections. And one of the things that Mass Historic noticed was that we said, preserve the entire central chimney from the basement within the structure to its termination above the roof line. And I went back, I looked both from my own personal recollection and also looked back at notes and minutes contemporaneous to the time. And that was the intent of the Historical Commission, was to do that. And I believe, and the owner and so forth agreed to that as well. So that was, but the problem is just mentioning that in that exhibit, in an exhibit, isn't sufficient. We've got to include that in the main body, as part of the baseline documentation, that one specific part of the interior, because the rest of the PR just talks about the exterior. So we just need to add that as part of what's protected in the body. And so that's an FYI. Caitlin and myself and so on will follow up on that with I think he's got an attorney helping him polish it up. So we'll make sure that gets in there so that chimney structure can be protected. I'm sure, well, with the exception of Biff, I think this was before you were on the board, recall that discussion about preserving that chimney, which was very characteristic of houses of that period, that large central chimney.
I know the house, but I wasn't
Yep.
a part of that, but yeah.
Yep. So that's what that's about. So we will endeavor to make sure that chimney is preserved properly in the PR. Let's see, general business. So now Andy was supposed to show up to talk about the downtown lighting thing. Did he forget that, Caitlin?
I'm not sure if he forgot it. He may have been at another meeting tonight, so perhaps he's just being held up.
Okay. I don't want to, well, very, very briefly, I'll just mention that they would like to upgrade those during the urban renewal, they put in that whole period, they put in those imitation old gas lamp type streetlights for the sidewalk lighting and so on. And they'd like to upgrade them to LEDs. Unfortunately, the way those light fixtures are built and construction, all that, it's really not feasible to do that. They'd have to be replaced. So they're looking at possible replacements. So that's all I'll really say. They were just looking for, Andy is working on that, Andy Port, the planning director, and he was looking for, collaboration with us guys on doing something that would be okay. I will just share with you that what I told Andy, and which I believe to be the sense of this board, because I think we did talk about this briefly, either I'm imagining it or I think we actually did talk about it, the fact that those lighting fixtures that are there are not truly historic, and that they are not old fabric. They don't date back to the 19th century or anything like that. They are 70s era fixtures that were designed to, look like they're not out of place, at least in an 18th or in a late 18th, early 19th century environment. So our sense was that, they can be replaced with another one that looks like at least wouldn't be terribly out of place, that uses LEDs. But I do remember we had a lot of discussion about the color temperature of the light.
Yep.
I'm sure you guys recall that. And so that I was very, very clear with Andy that was an important consideration for us. Okay, so we can move on to the last two items for tonight, and that's the approval of the minutes from the 26th of January and adjournment. So on the minutes, hopefully you've had a chance to review them. I can honestly say I did. Is there a motion to approve the minutes, or is there any corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you, Biff. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay, your vote on approving of the minutes, Biff.
Yes.
Okay, Chris Fay.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is affirmative. So the minutes are approved and may be published. And unless anyone has anything else, we can take a motion to adjourn. Anyone have any last words, or if alternatively, we can hear a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Seconded.
Okay, so Mr. Chris and Mr. Joe. Biff, do you vote to adjourn?
Oh, I better. Otherwise, we're never getting out of here, huh?
That's right.
Yes.
Mr. Fay
Yes.
and Mr. Morgan
Yes.
and Mr. Chair. Oops. Yes. So we are formally and officially adjourned. Thank you all. I see did you guys get my email? I only sent it about an hour and a half or so before tonight's meeting, encouraging you to join before 7 p.m.
I promise. I promise, Mr. Chair, I promise.
I see that email failed spectacularly to have the desired effect. The other thing is you'll see a little attachment there. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that yet. I found it really helpful. It's all about so-called Italianate style houses, of which apparently there are several variations of that particular theme. So take a look at that, because we do have a number of them in town, and they have come up for discussion a couple times recently. So on that note, thank you all. And we got it all done in an hour, actually technically 50 minutes, because we started at 10 minutes after. So I bid you all good night, and thanks again for your participation.
Night.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.